largest wildfire risk in the entire county. And finally, the age of property is also taken into consideration here. So this is it for the regional summary. If you want to look more into the variables, check out the report. So we're going to move on down to the next slide. So this is all the variables if you're interested, but it's also on the report. Next slide. So labor market analysis. Really quickly, LA has a lower labor force participation rate compared to other metropolitan areas that we can compare ourselves to. So that's like Atlanta, Dallas, Houston. We have a slightly higher rate than Phoenix, but that's mostly in part due to their large retirement community. This is seen as a big challenge and barrier, but it's also an opportunity. So among the population with higher participation rates, so we're seeing right here with this table, this chart, there's two charts. I'm going to address the chart on the bottom first. That's referring to LA County labor force participation by age over the last 30 years. And it's broken into age brackets. So it shows for each age bracket, it starts 16 to 19 all the way to 70 plus. What was the labor force participation over the last 30 years? Main takeaway is that 30 years ago, we had a lot more 16, 19-year-olds working and participating in LA County's economy in 1990. Now it's almost half of what it was back then. But on the flip side, we'll see that when it comes to LA County residents that are above the age of 50, we have a lot more people still continuing to be a part of the workforce. It's not quite clear what the reason is. We do have an aging population as a whole, California and LA County, but it could also be due to the fact that people just have to work more now. People are also living longer. The table on the top is showing LA County labor force participation by educational attainment for residents 25 and older. The key takeaway from this table is just looking at the stark difference between folks who have less than a high school graduate as their highest level of educational attainment compared to each incremental level, which is a little bit higher. So less than high school graduate labor force participation is 67%. High school graduate, including equivalency, GED, that's 75%. Some college or associate, that's 81%. Bachelor's degree or higher is 88%. Now, participating in the labor force doesn't guarantee a job. However, it's better to at least participate in it than to not be looking for a career at all. We see a lot of people that with less than a high school graduate are just not participating at all. So the question is, how can we reach those Angelinos? What are some challenges to participation that we found? We found that housing is a challenge. Affordable housing is a lack of in LA County. Education, childcare, transportation, and finally access to resources. So I'm just going to get into a little more detail if we go to the next slide. I have a few quotes here that I pulled out of the report. The main takeaway of the first quote is that there's nearly 72,000 people in LA County that are prime age, that's between the ages of 25 and 54, and they're not participating in the labor force or attending college. If we look closely at who this group is, it's 65% female and almost half are Latino. So this is a large group of female and Latino individuals in the county that are just not participating at all in the labor force. One thing on the aspect that they're female, one thing that the data found is that if you compare the labor force participation rate for a single male or a single female with no kids, it's almost identical. But if you have just one kid as a male versus one kid as a female, the female participation rate declines dramatically. But the male participation rate, it doesn't change much. This could be an indication that childcare is a barrier to participation in LA County's economy. The second quote is referring to folks who have disabilities in the county. We see that participation is significantly lower among those prime age people who have a disability, but people with disabilities have experienced a 14% increase in participation since the pandemic. Finally, the last quote is referring to racial differences that we see in LA County. So if you compare a black individual, an Asian individual, Latino, and white individual with a bachelor's degree, they all roughly participate in the labor force at 90%. However, if you look at those same racial groups at a lower educational attainment, such as not having a high school degree, which is the data point here, we see that it goes to 74% for the Latino group to 48% for Black individuals in the county. That means Black individuals in the county who don't have a high school graduate, or who are not high school graduates, have a much lower participation rate than other racial groups that are also not high school graduates. Next slide, please. So the next part of the analysis was the industry cluster analysis. This was primarily looking at what are the most regionally concentrated industries in LA County, because you want to leverage those industries for economic growth, since we already have a concentration. So we identified 7 as a part of this program. Something that's very useful that I suggest everyone check out is we have it by service planning area, so you can check it out for your neighborhood. What is the industries that are doing well in your neighborhood? But the 7 we identified for our program is transportation and logistics, aerospace, video production and distribution, clean renewable energy, construction, bioscience, and healthcare. So I'm going to just speak very briefly about the first 3. Video production and distribution, by the way, that's like motion picture industry. So, you know, LA, Hollywood, it's our strongest, oldest, well, one of our oldest industries, and it's the most regionally concentrated in the entire country. There's many positions in this motion picture industry that don't require a high school, a bachelor's degree. The challenge typically is the networks that are required to break into the industry, and currently, though it is still one of our strongest industries, it's facing significant challenges after the strikes of last year. Transportation and logistics continues to be a strong industry throughout many LA County spas. We actually see that even in some of the lower performing spas, such as Spa 6 East, it's east of the 110 in South LA, transportation logistics is growing. If you think of the type of careers that you can have in transportation logistics, many of these also do not require a high school, sorry, I keep saying high school. They don't require a bachelor's degree. So these are things like flight attendants, truck drivers, freight agents, clerks, sales representatives. These don't require bachelor's degrees, and they pay well. And when I say pay well, the average wage that we see in these industries, in these occupations, is $70,000 or more. Something to pay attention to is both of our ports. We have 2 of the largest ports. We have the 2 largest ports in North America. That's the LA port and Long Beach port. They're both transitioning to carbon neutrality, so a lot of opportunities for sustainability there. And also that provides opportunities for folks who want to learn new skills that come with the transition to carbon neutrality. Aerospace is a legacy Los Angeles industry. It has declined over the last 10 years, but over the 5 years, in some parts it's increased, and in some parts of the county it's also just increased in the last 10 years. My whole point with that was that it may not be as strong as it once was, but it's still a very strong industry in LA County that pays good wages in occupations that don't require a bachelor's degree. So, for example, guided missile and space vehicle manufacturing, that's more specifically what we're thinking of, aircraft manufacturing, and actually South Bay, where we are right now, is a very strong aerospace industry. Can we go to the next slide? Here are the other 4 industries. So we have clean and renewable energy. This is an extremely important industry for LA County moving forward. It's not currently regionally concentrated in LA County, but since the state and the county and many of our cities are trying to transition to carbon neutrality, it's going to be increasingly important. There's many occupations that pay well, above $80,000 per year on average, and these are things like electricians, clerks, installers, and telecommunications employees, and they don't require a 4-year degree. Healthcare is still seen as a strong industry in LA County. It's actually our largest industry. It's not our most regionally concentrated, but it's our largest, so it has the most total number of people employed are in healthcare in LA County. It pays a good wage, and it's increasingly important as our population ages. We're seeing increases in home and outpatient care and mental health services. Finally, we have construction and biosciences. Construction is also a very important industry. Some of the standards of green building and green construction will be very useful to learn for many people. Construction is typically seen as a field that has many careers and opportunities for folks who don't have bachelor's degrees, and that's for good reason, because there are many careers in there, such as carpenters, plumbers, fitters, clerks, and drywall, AC installers. These are things to take into consideration. And finally, biosciences. This is an industry that one of the challenges is actually an image problem. People hear bioscience and they think of like very sophisticated science like PhDs, Einstein, whatever. But it actually doesn't like require all of that. There's a lot of careers in bioscience that just require a high school degree and maybe some training. So yeah, if we think of what these industries are, it's just manufacturing. It could be manufacturing equipment for pharmaceutical, surgical, medicinal, medical, etc., even botanical. And these type of careers are technicians, operators, and testers. We go to the next slide. So here's a general SWOT. I'm going to skip over it, but it's just that I've kind of been going over it. It's just like how LA County doing. But yeah, check it out. So we go to the next slide. Oh, the threat. I don't know. Let's see. Okay, so the threats. We have climate change related threats. Okay, so including wildfire risk and the adverse effects of urban heat islands. So these are parts of the county that are hotter due to the built landscape. They're hotter than similar areas that don't have the same landscape. Essentially, this is due to a lack of green space, lack of shade, the asphalt. It could be like 7 degrees hotter. And we also found that Latino individuals tend to live in these urban heat islands more than other racial groups in the county. The second threat is the high degree of spatial inequality. We're seeing the inequality between the certain planning areas. West side is doing great, South LA not so much. Long Beach is doing good in some parts, other parts not so much. San Fernando Valley has a lot of inequality, etc. And then finally, this is kind of getting to the point of labor force participation. So while the average level of education among LA County residents increased, the number of jobs requiring higher levels of education and training are increasing at faster rates than the rate that our education is increasing. That's another threat, but it could be an opportunity. So yeah, we go to the next slide. All right, convening data. So we have a series of convenings, 50 plus convenings held by our community hub leads. These were organizations that convened in their thematic areas. There's 12 thematic areas, including youth, families, homeless, veterans, and seniors, migrant workers, immigrants, institutional governments, academia, economic development, employers and businesses, and civic engagement and place-based coalitions. So here are some findings from their meetings where they engage community members. If we go to the next slide, we'll see that some of the key challenges were some economic and social barriers for individuals in the community in LA County. So some of these barriers include the need for capital and technical assistance for disadvantaged businesses, a lack of hyper-local training. That's something that we found is a lot of people still, they like to stay within their localized community. They get the outreach in person, not digitally, and there's a lack of training programs to appeal to folks at that really local level. The housing crisis, of course, these are kind of more general problems that we see in LA County. Transportation, driving an hour and a half to work. I mean, it's good to have a job, but damn, that's difficult. It's not as sustainable, not really. Digital divide. We found that there's also some workforce and community issues with the lack of job training and education for older adults, non-English speakers, and marginalized communities. And the high school dropout rates continue to be a struggle in LA County. We go to the next slide, though, we can see some opportunities. So the opportunities revolve around economic development and innovation. These are some things that have worked in the past and could continue to work. So having these accelerator incubator programs for people, maybe combine that with a hyper-local approach to support supply chains, investment in green infrastructure, construction, clean and renewable energy, leveraging AI, robotics, instead of maybe seeing it as a threat, seeing how you can actually use it to your benefit. And then also we see that apprenticeships are commonly cited as a really successful and useful way to get people employed. Community infrastructure enhancement also, this is a pretty general thing, but just as LA County enhances its infrastructure, we're seeing investments, for example, in metro, different things across the county, major events like the 2028 Olympics. How can we use that infrastructure enhancement to the benefit of our disinvested communities in the county? Finally, I'm going to speak on survey data. So we go to the next slide. I'm just going to go over the survey data. Next slide, please. So overview of the surveys. As a part of our program, we had 90 organizations that conducted outreach to the communities throughout the service planning areas. There's a designated number for each service planning area. They're still representing those thematic areas I previously mentioned, minus government and government and academia. We collected 2,660 unique surveys over this about 2-month period. 36% were contacted through email, but 48% were still contacted in person. Participants were offered gift cards for completing the survey and attending the company meeting. So if we go to the next slide, where your respondents live, you see it's pretty even representation across the different service planning areas. Each one of them pretty much, Spa 7 East was almost there at 200, but they all pretty much got 200 people representing where they live in the county. If we see the breakdown of how survey respondents describe themselves in their gender, 59% said female, 39% said male, 1% said transgender. If we go to the next slide, we'll see how old are you. The majority of respondents were over the age of 35, over half of them, but we also had 126 people that were under 18, kids under 18, and 18 to 24 we had 383 as well.